Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Ice Creams and happy Tuesday. I just want to say we've got a very exciting guest for you this afternoon. This lady has had and continues to have an absolutely amazing acting career, but she's particularly beloved to obviously people that watch Ice Creams because, you know, we love sci-fi, we love horror. I would love very much to introduce to the show Catherine Mary Stewart. Catherine, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And I would like to say belated happy birthday. I believe it was the 22nd was your birthday, right?
It was the 22nd. My birthday is on Earth Day, which I kind of dig.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty cool. And you know what? Right off the bat, we're both Taurus. I'm May 6th. So there you go.
May 6th.
So
That's so funny.
Yeah, good energy here.
Yeah, my brother is May 4th and my mother, well, she passed away a couple years ago, but she was May 7th.
Oh, wow.
It's like we're practically related.
There you go. Do you know what? Absolutely. And you know what? As a matter of fact, speaking of which, you probably noticed the video game in the background I've got.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably going to have to start signing off REG every time as long as I don't sign DMK, doesn't matter, right? Okay.
I appreciate that. You know, I absolutely appreciate it. Or you could put CMS.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Okay. Catherine, I want to ask you because I didn't actually realize until recently you're actually Canadian, right? You were born in Edmonton.
I am. I was born in Edmonton, Alberta. Yeah, I left Edmonton when I was 18 and went to London, as a matter of fact, and was training as a dancer in London when I got my first acting gig, on camera acting gig. So that's when when I was 21, all of a sudden I was an actress. But yeah, I was born and raised in Edmonton, Alberta.
London, Ontario, or London, England?
England, London, England.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I wanted to double check there, because obviously because the odd thing is, obviously I'm from London, England, the original London in the London franchise, but yes. I actually spend a lot of time now in sort of London, Ontario. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is the question I get from people in Ontario. Because most people, don't think of London, Ontario, but I've gotten that question before, but it's always from a Canadian.
Amazing. So I want to ask you, growing up in Edmonton, what were obviously I sort of obviously see the trajectory of your life to this point. But back then, what were you reading? What were your influences? What was your music influences? What were you watching?
Good question. I played the piano from a very young age. My mother was really good at getting her children into classes and things. So I know that my oldest brother did guitar for a while, and my other brother did piano as well. And my mother tried to get him into gymnastics there for a while, but that didn't work. I did piano, I did gymnastics. My mother was responsible for getting me into dance, which I ended up thriving on doing. But in terms of, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s. So it was those 2 decades that influenced me the most. I remember in my family on Sundays, we would have like a brunch, Sunday brunch, which was usually pancakes and occasionally maybe French toast, but it was like a late breakfast. And my dad would always play music. And he generally played, if it wasn't classical, it was folk music like Burl Ives or Catherine McKinnon, who's Canadian, that kind of thing. But one time he put on the Beatles, and it was Rubber Soul, and we're all like, what? What is this? And that was my introduction to the Beatles, which I was an immediate massive fan. And of course, it was back in the day of records and everything. I know to this day every Beatles song, especially from Rubber Soul, by heart for sure. And then it was Revolver. And then it just went, we had, well, I'm not sure that my dad might have bought Revolver. I'm not sure. But after that, it was my two older brothers and I would collect these Beatles albums. And I feel fairly certain that we have pretty much every single one of them. Um, Up to, I'm not sure what their last album was off the top of my head now. I know there was the White Album and there was Abbey Road
Mhm.
around the same time. Do you remember what the last
I'm
Beatles album
trying to
was?
think. No, I'm sorry, I can't right off the top of my head.
Yeah. At any rate, so huge. The Beatles were huge. And then, when I got into high school and things, disco was very big. Um, and also things like, sort of Bread and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, um, all those kind of things. Oh, hold on, turn that off. Um, um, Musically, it was. I did like Elton John, but I don't think I ever owned an Elton John album. As a little kid, I loved the Monkees. I mean, Davy
Yeah.
Jones was probably my first crush. And I also remember going to movies and really loving musicals like The Sound of Music and Mary Poppins, and taking these albums home. And again, just playing them over and over and over again and memorizing all the lyrics and singing all the songs. I can still picture it in our living room with our record player going. I loved all that. I loved music and singing, and yeah.
Uh, there was a strong musical influence there, and
Mhm.
obviously you studied dance.
Mhm.
And was there ever a point, like, what was the point when you got to this junction in the road where you obviously clearly, you're an artistic soul? Where do you decide, okay, I want to go? It sounds almost like there ever a point where you were like, do I want to go to music or do I want to go to acting? Or did you ever have a clear focus on that where you exactly know this is where I want to be?
Well, my drive was towards dance. I
Okay.
mean, I really got into dance at the age of 14. And by 16, I was in a dance company in Edmonton called Synergy. And by 18, we were literally traveling all over the world. We did this tour for the UN peacekeeping forces for Christmas, and we were traveling throughout Alberta and stuff like that, performing. Um, and so when I graduated from high school, I knew that that's what I wanted to do is take my dance further. And I really wanted to move out of Edmonton. I wanted to go to a more of a dance cultural center, I guess. And so in my mind, I was thinking either Toronto,
Mhm.
New York, or London. And Toronto just seemed like too close to home. New York scared the crap out of me. And London, I have lots of relatives in London. I'd been to London a couple of times before. So it just felt like sort of exciting enough, but also somehow within my comfort zone. So I decided to go there, and I ended up going to this. It was primarily dance, but a general performing arts school called London Studio Center, which is still in existence today. And
Okay.
I believe I was looking it up the other day, and I believe that I attended that place in its first year. That was probably 19, what was it, 79. Um, and it's now a thriving, it's a big school in just outside of London, I believe now. But that is where I trained as a dancer, but I also studied acting. I mean, I'd done acting classes throughout junior high and high school, and also singing. Because I love singing. I mean, honestly, I think that had I not sort of diverted, well, not even diverted, but taken dance so seriously, I would have loved to have been some sort of a musical performer. I loved musicians. I loved the whole world, but my drive was really towards dance. So I pursued that. But I have to say, it's sort of one of my little underlying passions for sure. Um, yeah. So yeah. I forget what the question was.
No. I'm just no. It's okay. I'm wondering because obviously you went primarily into acting, but it sounds obviously
Right.
like you say that obviously you've got this passion for dance, and you
Hmm.
obviously have a passion for music there. So
Hmm.
and probably it's actually segues into another question where I was going to ask you, because the first big screen was the Apple, right? When
It was the Apple,
which was
and
a
so yeah,
sci-fi musical.
right. I was, yeah, I know. What a coincidence. I mean, I was living in London studying dance, and I just by chance ran into a couple of fellow students who were sort of, I was walking towards class and they were walking away, and I was like, what the heck? Where are you guys going? And they said, well, we heard about this audition, so we thought we'd just check it out. So I thought to myself, well, I may as well tag along. And I
Mhm.
remember she was really my dance mentor. She was my teacher, and then she was our choreographer in the dance company that I was in. Her name was Jill McDonald. Um, she said, when she knew that I was going to London, she said, take this time to, embrace every possibility that comes your way, like audition. She said, just really take advantage of the situation. So that was sort of in the back of my head, and I thought, okay, I'll go. I don't really know what this kind of audition entails even. So yeah, I'll check it out and see what happens. So it was a cattle call audition. Uh, and I just sort of started dancing around, following the choreography. And the director pulled me out and asked me if I could act. And I was like, yeah, sure, I can act. I don't know. Can you sing? Yeah, I can sing. So he auditioned me. I mean, I literally went from the middle of this dance audition to being sort of thrown into this situation that I'd never been in before,
Mhm.
reading for director producer and singing for them. And it was a matter of days. They did audition another one of the dancers who ended up dancing in the movie for the role, but they somehow decided I was right for it. And in retrospect, it was sort of the perfect role for me because I kind of was that character. Her name was Bibi, and she was just this sort of naive, innocent young woman who was thrust into this world of music, as it turns out. Um, and anyway, it was sort of like I just kind of played myself,
Mhm.
and that was my entree into the acting world.
Into the acting world. What do you,
Hmm.
so you're suddenly in this, in this sort of big, because I mean, obviously you went on to obviously do Days of Your Lives and such, but movie, from what I understand, movie and TV are very different in terms of the sort of the scale.
Uh-huh.
And what was your kind of what did you learn from the Apple that kind of prepared you for your next steps on sort of the big screen journey?
Right. Well, just actually experiencing it. I'd never been in front of a camera before. So it was sort of trial by fire.
Mhm.
But one thing that dance does give you is discipline, and and you just can sort of move through anything with relative ease because dance is so structured, so disciplined. You have to be just on. There's no relaxing in dance. There's no, oh, it's all about me, kind of a thing. So I already had a really great foundation for going into the business in the way that I did, and having to just kind of learn on the go. Um, and I learned some hard lessons that, for instance, one day, you get these things called call sheets the night
Right.
before you work to see if you're going to be working that day or not, and what the scenes are that you're going to be shooting and all this other stuff. And I went out this one night, and we were shooting in Berlin, in Germany, before the wall was down. And West Berlin was this crazy place. It was almost like they were, uh, it was the polar opposite to East Berlin. East
Right.
Berlin, which we also had access to. We could actually go into East Berlin, but nobody from East Berlin could come out.
No,
But it
right.
was just like dead. It was quiet. It was gray. It was and West Berlin was like the polar opposite. It was like party all night long and
Yeah.
crazy people, and yeah, it was crazy. So one night, this one day after shooting, I decided I'm just going to go out because I wasn't working the next day, and I stayed out all night long, had so much fun. I got home, um, I don't know, 7 in the morning or something, back to the hotel, and found, these ADs scrambling to figure out where I was. There was no cell phones or anything like that in
Right.
those days.
Absolutely.
There's no way they had no idea where I was. They were freaking out. And as it turned out, I was working that day and I didn't know it. And I was a couple of hours late, which is expensive when it comes to shooting. And they had to sort of rearrange the schedule a little bit. And the director, Menachem Golan, I was in makeup. He came down that day and he was so mad at me. And he sort of looked at me and he says, "You will never work in this business again." Like that. And I was like, "Oh, geez, wow, that is quite the reaction." It's funny because I was just kind of gliding along on this wave, and
Yeah.
it wasn't like I'd said to myself, "Okay, this is my career, and boy, I can't let anything get in the way of that." When he said that to me, it was almost like it sounded like a bad movie, and it gave me anxiety because I didn't want to disappoint the director, but
Yeah.
at the same time, I was like, "Oh my God, if this is the end of my career, you know, that's a lot, but at least I haven't invested that much into it, and I plan to go back to dancing anyway." So,
Oh my God, that's awesome.
but that
And
was a weird experience.
it's funny hearing you tell a story there about Menahem as well, because I mean, obviously, there's a big interest now in people looking back in the canon story of Golden Globus,
Yeah,
right? Of which
right.
you were a part there, right? So it's interesting that you hear this story about this character that's such a personality.
Yeah. Oh,
Obviously,
yeah, he was.
obviously, you did work in the business again. That wasn't the end of that wasn't the end of
Mhm.
your career there. So I want to kind of jump forward a little bit to sort of around the 1984 period, because this was really like a big period for you. I mean, sci-fi, Star Wars had lit the fuse of a bomb that detonated right into the 80s, and Tron came along and started messing with, oh, let's do a movie with computer generated stuff. And now comes The Last Starfighter, where they're taking that and going full on epic with it. We're going to do these space battles, and it's going to be practical and computer generated, and I mean, it really captured the imagination of people from, I would have been 13 at the time.
Perfect age for it.
Perfect, right? And I can remember
Right.
watching it and just my eyes popping out of my head, just like, so walk me through, how did your career take you to The Last Starfighter? What happened there?
Right. So, at some point, I moved to Los Angeles. Um, yeah, I think I'm trying to remember what motivated me exactly to move there, but I think it was just I was living in London and I just wanted to, move forward with my career, and of course Hollywood. You got to go to Hollywood, especially back then. Um, so I moved to Los Angeles, and based on the fact that I had this lead role in The Apple, I got an agent very quickly, and I started getting little bits and pieces of work here and there. And I guess the first big thing that sort of sustained me or supported me was Days of Our Lives. That was the first big gig that I
Right,
got where I
right.
was getting a regular paycheck. I was so broke when I got that show. The first day that I shot Days of Our Lives as Kayla Brady, my car ran out of gas just outside the gates of the NBC studios in the Valley. So thank God I ran out of gas there. And I ran in, I had to borrow some money to fill up my tank. But after that, I made a pretty good living, and I was doing Days of Our Lives, but I was also auditioning outside of Days of Our Lives. And I auditioned, just the regular way you audition for anything, for The Last Starfighter. And everybody was, in this audition, all the Brat Pack or whatever they were called at that time were there. I remember Eric Stoltz was there, and uh, all those people of that age. Um, and I auditioned, and then I had a call back, and they paired me with Lance Guest.
Okay.
And he and I, we sort of did a somewhat of an oh my God, I can't say it, improvisation in the office with the director and the producer and things like that, where we literally lay on the floor and as though we were at the lake, and we were just kind of like looking up at the sky and looking at the stars, and it was sort of a romantic situation. This is what I recall anyway. It was a long time ago. But he and I, Lance and I had a good chemistry, and I
Yeah.
guess they really didn't want like a big name necessarily. I mean, nobody knew who I was, and that was good for me and Lance. And we just ended up being cast for this thing, and we've stayed really, really good friends since.
I know obviously you got to be very careful what you say, so I'm going to word this very, very, very carefully. Sesame Street is brought to you today by the word theoretical. And as we know, there are theoretical rumbles of The Last Starfighters, potential sequel that is things that are been doing the rounds, and there's been a special effects thing that's gone online and stuff. Theoretically, if you were theoretically asked to re-up and come back to the cast, would you theoretically be interested in doing that?
I wouldn't even theoretically be interested in doing that. I would insist that I was in it. I don't even care if I'm an extra in the background. But but honestly, there has been chatter about a sequel for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. Lance and I, years ago, must have been 10 or 15 years ago, I live in New York, but I was in Los Angeles, and he and I went out for lunch with Nick Castle, the director, and Nick was telling us about this idea for a sequel. At that time, the only problem is that Universal owned the property, right? And Jonathan Betchell, who wrote the script, couldn't get it. But now there is this rule that after 30 years, if the writer wants to repossess the property, they can. Oh. So it has been over 30 years, and Jonathan Betchell absolutely repossessed it. And they have been shopping around an idea that, as far as I know, as with all the evidence and everything that I've heard from Nick directly, and I haven't spoken to Jonathan directly about it, but yeah, Lance and I would be involved. And it'd be more about our children, being involved with, and probably much more special, well, certainly more advanced special effects. You talk about the CGI back in the day. When you look back at it now, it's pretty basic, but and in The Last Starfighter, the people that wrote the programs for that CGI, it was groundbreaking. I mean, literally.
Oh, absolutely.
Tron had some CGI in there, but it was nothing compared to what they accomplished in The Last Starfighter. It was they were literally creating program. So when we shot The Last Starfighter, all of this was going on behind the scenes. I had no idea. I found out about this stuff 25 years later at a screening, a 25th anniversary screening of The Last Starfighter in Los Angeles. They had all the technical people up there for a Q&A afterwards, and I learned that while we were shooting, they were still sort of debating whether or not we would do practical special effects or this new, CGI thing.
Right.
And so these computer people were literally creating programs while we were shooting as quickly as they could, because there was a real time limit involved. And they didn't know for sure that they were even going to attempt to use these things until the last minute. And they even talked about how they wished they'd had more time to get into more detail. But it was Last Starfighter was truly, CGI today sprung from the CGI in Last Starfighter.
You when you look at shows that came afterwards, like Babylon 5, you can see the DNA of The Last Starfighter in there, and it's wonderful. It's magical to see that. And in terms of a sequel, some movies, you get to a movie and you're like, yeah, you know what? Why are you making a sequel to this? The story has all been told. The Last Starfighter really, if ever there's a movie that really had a jumping point off for further adventures, that was it. Like when he comes back at the end and you guys are reunited, and it's like, wow, like what's going to happen next? But I'd love to move on to Night of the Comet, if we may, because I gotta tell you, this is absolutely one of the most special movies I've ever seen in my entire life. I'll give you my perspective on that in a second. Okay. But this is about you, so I really want to hear your thoughts first and foremost. So you get this script with this wonderful, it's one of the female empowerment movies of the 80s. These two sisters, you get this role of Reggie. And what's your feeling when you're reading that for the first time and you've got this in front of you and you're like, okay, this is my role. What do you feel?
Well, what I loved about the character of Reggie was that she was a real departure from what I'd been cast as before that. I mean, BB and the Apple, Kayla Brady, virgin nurse in Days of Our Lives, and the girl next door in The Last Starfighter. And when this role came along, I was like, I like this character. This is even, and she's closer to who I really am as well. So I could sort of sink my teeth into it. I was always sort of a tomboy growing up and pretty athletic, and I have two older brothers, so there was that element, trying to keep up with them. So mostly I thought, what a great character. I didn't think in terms of, how groundbreaking this is in terms of women empowerment. I just didn't think about that. I just really liked the character, and I loved sort of the comedic element of this sort of horror / comedy / zombie thing. It was it was an unusual script, and I really loved that about it. And I think that's absolutely contributed to its sort of life, because it's different from other movies.
Very different. And I think in terms of getting back to the empowerment being there, I think the joy is that it doesn't beat you over the head with it. It's just an organic part of what the story is, right?
Yeah. I think so. I think, and the way we played it was we weren't trying to be Superwoman, or we didn't yet Reggie and Sam didn't take themselves very seriously. We were just
Yeah.
a couple of girls who happened to know how to shoot Mac 10s because our dad was in the Green Berets. And he insisted that we learn. I mean, it was nothing extraordinary. We were just a couple of normal young women who are girls, really teenagers, who happened to survive this apocalypse. And we just sort of like kind of took it in stride. In fact, it made life a little bit easier in a way, and maybe a little more fun based on the mall scene where we're dancing around enjoying ourselves. um yeah, I love that because I think it was organic in that way.
Mhm.
um we were just playing girls, that happened to have these, we were able to take care of ourselves. But I mean, honestly, girls can take care of themselves. It would be the fact that women always have to be taken care of by men or whatever it is. It's either that or they're superheroes, and are
Right.
basically playing
Gotcha.
what maybe traditionally thought of as a male role.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the case with Night of the Comet. We were just a couple of girls who could look after themselves like every other girl on the planet Earth, but maybe this was recognized. And when you say empowering, I mean, going to conventions and things and having people come up who love this movie, girls will say, how they, how you need a role. We talk about role models all the time.
Yeah.
It's so important to see people like you in a position of some sort of influence or whatever, a movie or whatever, in politics, in every where they're sort of play maybe somewhat of a leadership role. It's so important for everyone, men, women, people of any kind of color or sexual orientation. It's so important for them to see themselves in these different roles. Um, and that was expressed over and over again. And also, there's this idea that, oh, guys aren't going to want to go to a movie and see a couple of girls. No, so many guys,
Yeah.
we love those
Uh,
characters
yeah.
so much,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I guess in a way, in retrospect, it's always in retrospect because at the time you just kind of do these things and they come out and whatever. But in retrospect, it was kind of groundbreaking in a way and hopefully influential to kids watching it in a positive way.
I'd like to tell you what it meant to me, if I may,
Oh, please do.
because in some ways I've almost waited 30 odd years to tell you this.
No.
I think that movie is very special, and I'll tell you why.
Mhm.
At that point in time, you know, we were living really with the threat of nuclear war. Everything was just so dark. We were a year on from Nicholas Myers, The Day After, which
Mhm.
terrified me. I mean, I was 13 or 14 at the time, right? And
Mhm.
honestly, Catherine, I got to tell you, there was times there, speaking for myself and kids like me, that we were convinced that we weren't going to have a future, that it was done.
Mhm.
And I would have nightmares about this thing. Then this movie comes along that, like you say yourself, there's almost like a feel good element to it, and it was almost the tonic we needed at that time. It was kind of like, look, you know what? Let's take a bit of a fun look at this apocalypse situation. We're not seeing destroyed infrastructure. Look, we're going to go ride on a Harley through a deserted city. We're going to go dance in a mall. And it kind of like that was, like, for me, what latched me onto those characters. And it sort of made me feel a bit better in a way. And I think a lot of kids my age at that point, the end of the world was way too heavy on our minds back then
Oh,
in
it's very
84.
interesting you say that. I haven't heard that before, but thank you. Yeah, I mean, oh, for sure. I'm actually fascinated by end of the world or apocalyptic kind
Mm,
of movies just to see, what sort of ideas people come up with. And generally, of course, they're apocalyptic. You have, a couple of hours left to live, kind of a thing. And it's always very heavy and tragic, and there's no survivors. But and so it's kind of great that these are the characters who survive. And this was open to a sequel as well, but Tom Eberhardt, the director, writer, has no interest in making a sequel. But yeah, it's a real interesting perspective. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. But yeah, and it just seems to, it's funny, but time seems to catch up to it. It seems like more people are discovering in it as time goes on. So I obviously, so you had this, and this was what was the next thing? Because obviously the next thing for me that really put you on my radar in a massive way was Nightflyers. I love Nightflyers.
Okay, right. Yeah.
Right.
That was another sci-fi thing. I mean, I went after Night of the Comet, I did a, a completely about face in a movie called Mischief, which was set in the 50s. And actually, I still to this day feel like it's an underrated movie. It's just a lovely, lovely movie. With some really good actors. Kelly Preston was in it, who sadly passed away earlier in the last year. Chris Nash, who's moved on to he's more of a musician now, but Doug McKeon, who was in On Golden Pond. Jamie Gertz is in it. It's a lovely movie about kids in the 50s at that very transitional time. Its original name was called Heart and Soul, and so there's a story behind why it was changed to Mischief, but it's just a lovely story about kids transitioning from high school to adulthood. And it's just one of those stories that everybody can relate to. And I really felt like it was incredibly authentic in terms of the time period, and so much fun to do as well. But when it was finished, when we wrapped, 20th Century Fox was the studio, and they were going through this huge transition. It was being bought out by somebody rather, and they decided that this movie should be more of a sex romp kind of a thing. Gotcha. So they turned it into that kind of idea. And whereas originally it was more sort of about relationships and kind of the tragedy of this young couple, myself and Chris Nash, and he's sort of from the wrong side of the tracks and all that kind of stuff, and how we resolve that. At any rate, it's still a lovely movie, and I really recommend that. So I'm just saying, I did kind of do an about face and work on a completely different kind of a thing, which is one of the wonderful things about acting. If you can possibly break out of your previous role, that's certainly what I attempt to do.
And Weekend at Bernie's, right?
Yep, Weekend at Bernie's. Yeah, exactly. Weekend at Bernie's, but that was a little bit later.
Further on down, right? Yeah.
Further on down, and again, a big about face. It was I'd never really done that kind of a comedy before. That sort of slapstick, broad, comedy. So that was super fun as well. But yeah, then I did. Oh, then I got to. After Mischief, I got to play a rock and roll singer in a thing called Scenes from the Gold Mine. Again, I had a whole different character. Very, very 80s. Oh my gosh, I look at the costumes and the hair and everything. Oh my God. It was sort of, 80s on steroids. Wow. But it was, again, super fun, because one of my fantasies, of course, is being a musician or a rock and roll singer or something like that. So I got to live vicariously through that character. And then I did Nightflyers. Yeah. So I got back to the sort of the sci-fi genre.
Sci-fi, right? Yeah. Yeah. Nightfly. So was that one where there was like a casting call and you auditioned for it, or did someone approach you specifically with you in mind for the character of Miranda?
I believe they offered me that role. Yeah. And that was also a fascinating role, because the character of Miranda, if you read the novella,
Mm,
she's this tall Amazon. I think she's black as well because they did a series
correct.
on,
Yeah, on
was it on Netflix? Was it
Netflix.
Netflix?
Yeah, yeah.
And the character, the woman who played Miranda in that, was much more true to the novella. But anyway, they cast me, but I thought this will be challenging because Miranda's supposed to be sort of half robot, half human.
Right.
And so there's like this sort of expressionless kind of power, strength, a superhuman kind of strength to her, but she's kind of like, it's almost like a Spock character in a way. Anyway, it just sounded fascinating to me, and I thought this is cool. This is really serious sci-fi. It's
Yes.
not Night of the Comet is kind of a combination of different things, but Nightflyers was like, this is full on sci-fi.
Yeah. Yeah. And was so I gotta, because we talk about this kind of like the sort of, you mentioned the expressionlessness, the Spockishness.
Yeah.
Was that where the glasses come in? Because I searched around Covent Garden in London so much.
Oh.
I wanted those glasses. I loved them so much, but it gave you that sort of mysteriousness,
That's right. Well, those glasses were made specifically for the role, so you wouldn't have been able to find them. And you may have noticed they were very flat, so you saw the reflection
Mm,
of other people, like as we're riding to the spacecraft, whatever it was called. You see a close up of me and the reflection of Lisa Blount in them, and yeah, they were super cool. But yeah, that it was meant to sort of be kind of a veil of mystery or something like that. It was definitely part of the character, especially the introduction, because I think once I took them off, I never put them on again.
really?
But yeah, and I had them on during the voice, like a whole introduction to it was explaining kind of the foundation of the story, and I was wearing them during that time. And so there's the reveal when they do like
Yeah.
the ID thing with the eye. Yeah. Yeah, those are cool. I love those
Oh,
things.
super.
I
I,
wish
I
I
gotta show
kept
you.
them.
I gotta show you something actually. I was gonna
Okay.
show you, I got this here. So 1987, I guess at the Virgin Megastore, I got the soundtrack for,
What?
and look who's on the back there in the glasses. There you go,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Yeah,
I
I know.
love it. I love
One of these
it.
days when we're not quarantined anymore, I'm going to come to New York and I'd like you to sign this for me because this is like
I'm happy to do it. I'd
amazing.
love to. That's great. That's very
Oh,
cool.
I loved everything about Nightflyers. I loved the soundtrack. I thought it was all and like you say, it was dealing with, it kind of took a step away from, sort of shoot those aliens to the kind of the bigger questions of sci-fi, who are we, what's out there, and augmented humans. The scene where you're doing I gotta ask you, when you're doing the gymnastics in the and they're showing kind of Miranda's that she's this augmented human. Is
Mm-hmm.
that you doing the flips and stuff on there?
Well, I did take gymnastics, but but that was when I was like 8. So no,
Okay.
sadly, that was not me. Um, yeah, that was a girl who could actually do that kind of thing. The poor thing. Those bars, so in gymnastics, the uneven bars, they're wood and they're
Mm,
smooth wood, and you put chalk on your hands and you wear leather pads or whatever, and you just, slide around the bars very easily. These were made of metal.
yeah.
And she had no chalk, she had no leather glove thing or anything, and her hands got really ripped up doing that. So I'm glad it wasn't me. But I land it right.
Amazing.
And it switches to me.
What's probably your strongest, because obviously you say there was a great cast. I mean, you were working with obviously James Avery, Lisa Blount, both who sadly no longer, and for the record, I love Lisa as well. She was fantastic in Prince of Darkness, another one
Oh,
of my
she's a
favorite movies from that year.
wonderful
um
actor.
what would you say is your probably most prevalent positive memory from that particular movie set, from that cast, that set?
I'm going to say actually the most positive thing it was working with that cast.
Yeah.
James Avery, oh, just such a lovely, lovely human being, and such a good actor. Lisa Blount. Um, we we had worked together. I'm just trying to remember the name of it. It was this really bad TV movie we did together, and we worked on that as well. So she and I had become pretty good friends, kind of in passing. But she was such a generous actor too, and no kind of stuffiness or stuck up. Sometimes I work with female actors, and they feel competitive with the other actress per se. None of that with her. She was so good, and she won a Golden Globe, I believe. I don't know. Maybe she was just nominated. I think she won a Golden Globe for Officer and a Gentleman. She as some best supporting actress. So she's done some incredible work. I loved working with her so much. Just trying to think of all the other actors that are in there. So it was just an incredible cast. I mean, that was
you were with Michael Praed as well, right? Who was from who was another favorite of mine from Robin of Sherwood. Yeah.
Michael Praed is so good looking and such a sweet man, such a gentleman. We had a lovely time working together. Glenn Withrow, who also did a movie I did called Dudes. And I think he's doing a lot of directing now, but Glenn Withrow played Keeler. Such a great character. I just love his face. And he just makes me smile just looking at him because he's so funny. Helen Udy, who's Canadian as well, lovely actress. Michael Debar, the musician, and John Standing, just an iconic actor.
Yeah.
So it was an incredible cast.
Yeah.
It was not the most organized set. In fact, when we started, they hadn't really written an ending to it.
Really?
So that kind of was an issue. And it was a problem. But so there was a bit of agita on the set in general, but I'm telling you, the cast, we all had the best time.
Amazing stuff. And again, like I say, I mean, speaking for myself, you can't tell I'm a complete sci-fi nerd or anything, but or a nerd. But yeah, I mean, that one really stuck with me. When I watched that back in the day, I was like, wow, I was recommending it to everyone. You got to see this. You got to see this. You got to see.
Yeah,
but
it's really cool. It's unusual in that the ship itself becomes its own character.
Yes,
that controls the Michael Praed character as his mother. It's just kind of weird and creepy. And
it's wonderful, yeah.
Yeah, and then the reason we go there in the first place, John Standing has this idea that he's researching something out there, and he gets just sort of swept up into this sort of fantastic fantasy. And anyway, it is kind of sort of a psychological thriller as well.
So I guess I want to. So you've done all these great TV roles, because I mean we're only scratching the surface of your career. I mean, you've done so much, so many movies, so much TV. What would you, if someone was to come along to you now at this point in your life and say, okay, Catherine, what role would you really like to play that you haven't maybe done before? What's your kind of dream role? What would you love to do right now, today?
Well, for me, that's kind of a mystery. I have to be sort of taken off guard. Somebody has to offer me something that I completely do not expect. You know what I mean? It's like, I I really can't say that, oh, if I played this thing, that would complete my life or something like that, or make my career complete. It's always being, for me, being surprised at what the character might be or not be, and can I sort of wrap my head around it or sink my teeth into it. In fact, I have this it's just I have an audition tomorrow for a character that's a judge, but it's for a kids show, but it is so hilariously written. I mean, one of her, it's I can't say anything about it obviously right now
Mhm.
because it's a big secret.
Understandable, yeah.
Um, but I played a judge before.
Okay.
I played a judge on White Collar, but it was a traditional judge role. And I was thinking, oh, a judge, okay, what is this? And I started reading the dialogue, and it was so funny and so well written, and it kind of, the words sort of come trippingly off the tongue, which is unusual. Some scripts are just impossible to say. I don't know. It's weird. There are some scripts that you get where they have all this dialogue, and you're like, I can't say this, and it doesn't come out of your mouth very easily. This is different, and so this is surprising. So it's, what is so wonderful about this industry is that you are surprised by what you're offered or you audition for, and I never exactly know, and I don't want to know. I don't want to have an idea of what it is I should do or want to do. I want to be surprised.
You don't want to know what Christmas presents are under the tree. You're like, yeah,
Oh, I like the surprise. That
that's
would wreck it. That would wreck it if you knew. I think you might shake it a little.
your energy. I gotta tell you, like, listen, I actually said, to viewers, to Catherine, I wasn't going to mention this at the end of at the beginning. I said, I'm not going to say nothing about this, but I've actually been feeling I'm really sick over the weekend. I got to tell you, you have been like a crazy boost of vitamin C because your energy is infectious. It
Oh,
really
thank
is.
you.
It's like,
Oh.
man, I love it. It's amazing. I
I hope you're okay. Have you been tested?
Yeah,
I
oh
mean, I
yeah,
know
I've
in
been tested.
Canada it's very difficult to get the shot, right?
Yeah, you've been tested. No, it's okay. It's not that. I think honestly, I've just been working super, like I've been working crazy hours, burning the midnight oil, and I think I've just kind of
Mm,
run myself into the ground a little
mm,
bit. But I'm there. I'm good,
yeah,
and you've really helped me today. This is amazing.
good.
Been better than a trip to the doctors.
Oh,
Um,
well, that's something.
I do want to ask you one final question before I let you get on with your afternoon, because I ask this of every every female actor that I'm fortunate enough to have these conversations with, and that is that somewhere out there's another Catherine who's at that age where she's interested in dance, music, whatever. She's got this future ahead of her that may be very much along your trajectory. It may be
Hmm.
along your trajectory and then goes off to another way. But what is your personal, what is your gift of wisdom to that girl that's listening to this now, watching this interview?
Hmm. Well, as I mentioned earlier, when I went to London, my mentor said, just leave yourself open for every opportunity and grab it if it comes along. I mean, it's sort of like the line that Vernon Washington in The Last Starfighter says, when it comes, grab it and don't let go. That's not exactly what it is, but just stay open for every opportunity, invite every opportunity in, and one thing that I've found, and this is going to sound a little crazy, but when you have a love for something and you just put it out there in the universe, wherever you can, mention it, talk about it, surround yourself with people who are supportive of that. Um, get involved in the area that you want to be involved in. If you want to be an actor, sign up for your local theater company, really create a foundation and just keep that energy out there I mean, it sounds weird, but keeping it out there in the universe, that just doesn't mean you think about it and hope something happens. You just keep putting it out there, just little drops here and there. um uh y- i- i- you know, network is very important. Networking, when you start getting involved, say for as an example, you join a local theater company or club or whatever it is, there are going to be people there who might be able to open even a small door for you, that if you step through it, it'll open another two doors. It opens up exponentially, and that's very, very important. And then you just keep with what your dream is, you know, try to make your trajectory in the direction that you see yourself going in. There's a lot of luck involved, but you have to be open to receiving the luck as well. That's the most important thing. um, and as it takes time. You build and you build, and it snowballs, and you just, as it grows, you take advantage of the growth. It's amazing how it works, how one door after another will open. Like I said, the doors open exponentially if you focus on those doors opening.
Agreed, 100%. Catherine Mary Stewart, it has been an absolute joy. I feel very blessed that you spent this time with me this afternoon. Thank you very much. And we will continue to watch your career.
Thank you. Yes, I'm excited. Actually, during this whole pandemic thing, I've been focusing on writing and producing, and I have a script that's been optioned. So we'll see how that unfolds for me to direct and to star in.
Excellent.
I really want to talk about putting it out in the universe.
Yep.
I'm absolutely, my next step is to direct, for sure. So that's what I'm working towards right now, and it's very exciting. So
Nice.
It's almost given the pandemic has sort of given me the opportunity to turn it into a really positive motion forward in terms of, you know, the directing and the writing and the producing. Yeah.
Good luck.
So
good luck. And remember,
excited.
I'm coming to New York. I want to get this signed.
If I could do it, I would do it right now, right here. But it doesn't work that way yet.
Thank you.
Maybe someday.
Catherine, have a wonderful afternoon. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
And you. Take care.
Take care.